Hey, it's CJ here again, coming to you with a comparison of the Modal Electronics Argon8 versus the ASM Sound Machine Hydrasynth in the
epic great battle of the digital wave scanning synthesizers.
Let's get it on!
Okay, gentlemen, let's discuss the rules of the game. First, respect your opponent. Know that both these synthesizers are awesome. They are a pleasure to own and a pleasure to use. There will be 3 rounds in this match. First round, we'll discuss the features. Each feature will be given 1 point and will be totaled at the end of the round. For the second round, we'll compare the sound of the 2 synthesizers. Lastly, in the third round, we'll have special commentary and declare a winner of
the epic great battle of the digital wave scanning synthesizers.
Okay, you ready? Let's get started. Okay, for round 1 between these 2 awesome synthesizers, let's look at what they have in common. First, they're both 8-voice polyphonic synthesizers. They are digital. They're basically software in a box. And they both have wave scanning capabilities. Now let's look at some of the differences. I've selected 28 different points, of which to give them a score, I'll score 1 point per each individual feature. First, the options of keyboards and modules. The Hydrasynth has the module. It also has a 49-key keyboard. The Argon8 has this 3-octave keyboard. It also has a module and it has a 5-octave keyboard. So let's score 2 for the Hydrasynth and 3 for the Argon8. Now let's look at the number of oscillators. The Hydrasynth has 3 oscillators. Now, to be fair, the third oscillator isn't nearly as powerful as the first 2, so we're going to call it 2.5 for the Hydrasynth. For the Modal Electronics Argon8, we have 2 oscillators. So we're going to score 2.5 for the Hydrasynth and 2 for the Argon8. Next, we're going to look at the LFOs. The Hydrasynth has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 LFOs. The Argon8 has 1, 2 LFOs. So we're going to score 5 for the Hydrasynth and 2 for the Argon8. Next, we're going to look at the number of envelope generators. For the Hydrasynth, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 envelope generators. For the Argon8, you have 1, 2, 3 envelope generators. So we're going to score 5 for the Hydrasynth, and we're going to score 3 for the Argon8. Now, let's look at the number of filters. The Hydrasynth has 2 filters. They can be routed in both series and in parallel. The Argon8 has 1 filter. So score 2 for the Hydrasynth and 1 for the Argon8. Now let's look at the number of filter types. The Hydrasynth has 11 different filter types. The Argon8 has 2 different filter types. So let's score 11 for Hydrasynth and 2 for Argon8. Now let's look at the number of modulations to the oscillator. For the Hydrasynth, they call those mutants, and there are 2 apiece. 2 apiece for each oscillator. 1, 2, 1, 2. For the Argon8, there is 1 modulation. So score 2 for the Hydrasynth and 1 for the Argon8. Now let's look at the number of effects. For the Hydrasynth, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 effect slots. For the Argon8, you have 1, 2, 3 effect slots. So for the Hydrasynth, we're going to score 4, and for the Argon8, we'll score 3. Let's look at the arpeggiator. Both synthesizers have very capable arpeggiators, so we're going to score 1 for the Hydrasynth and 1 for the Argon8. Let's look at the sequencers. For the Hydrasynth, there's no sequencer. For the Argon8, you have a very capable sequencer with 4 modulation lanes. So we're going to score 0 for the Hydrasynth and 1 for the Argon8. Now, let's look at the patch librarian. For the Hydrasynth, you have a patch librarian. For the Argon8, there's also a patch librarian for the Argon8. So we're going to score 1 for the Hydrasynth and 1 for the Argon8. Let's look at computer editor. For the Hydrasynth, well, at the time of this video making, it isn't just ready yet. For the Argon8, it has a very capable computer editor called the Modal app. So score 0 for the Hydrasynth and 1 for the Argon8. Now let's look at real-time controls. For the Hydrasynth, you have 3 different types of real-time controls. On the keyboard version, you have the ribbon control, you have the modulation pitch bend combination, and you have the macro controls. For the Modal Electronics Argon8, you just have the joystick here, which is great. Great feeling joystick. So we're going to score 3 for the Hydrasynth, and you have 1 for the Argon8. Okay, let's look at channel aftertouch. Monophonic channel aftertouch, both of them have it. Okay, so we'll score 1 each for the Hydrasynth and 1 for the Argon8. Let's look at polyphonic aftertouch. The Hydrasynth has polyphonic aftertouch on both the module with the pads as well as with the keyboard. For the Argon8, you have no polyphonic aftertouch. Let's score 1 for the Hydrasynth and 0 for the Argon8. Let's look at MPE support. With the latest software update, the Hydrasynth has MPE support. The Argon8, no MPE support. So we'll score 1 for the Hydrasynth and 0 for the Argon8. Next, we're going to look at macro control. Macro control is where you can take one knob and control many different parameters. For the Hydrasynth, you have 8 macro controls. For the Argon8, there's no macro control. So for the Hydrasynth, we're going to score 1, and for the Argon8, we'll score 0. Now, let's look at CV inputs. The inputs and outputs on the Hydrasynth, you have 2 inputs, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 outputs. For the Argon8, you have 3 input outputs. So we'll score a total of 7 for the Hydrasynth and 3 for the Argon8. Again, voice polyphony, they both have ace voice polyphony, so we're going to score 8 for both the Hydrasynth as well as the Argon8. Now we'll look at the different modulations that are available. You have ring mod on both the Hydrasynth as well as the Argon8, so we'll score 1 for the Hydrasynth and 1 for the Argon8. Both of them have FM modulation or phase modulation, as it's often called. So you score 1 for the Hydrasynth and 1 for the Argon8. And lastly, we're going to look at amplitude modulation or AM modulation. For the Hydrasynth, there is no amplitude modulation. For the Argon8, it does have that in there. So score 0 for the Hydrasynth and 1 for the Argon8. Now we're going to talk about the UI here. Okay, this is based on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best or 1 being the worst. I'm going to score for the Hydrasynth a 5 out of 5. The reason being is that everything here is laid out nicely for you. It's easy to get to whatever you want to go to. Modulation routings are very easy to get to. So it's very easy to get to where you want to do. There's very little use of the shift key. For the Argon8, I'm going to score that a 4. It's still very easy to get to where you want to do. You can do the modulation routings, but there is quite a bit use of the shift key for the second level of parameters. So we're going to score 5 for the Hydrasynth and 4 for the Argon8. Now we're going to look at both of them. They have heart sync. Now for heart sync, both have heart sync capabilities. So we're going to score 1 for the Hydrasynth and we're going to score 1 for the Argon8. And we're going to look at soft sync. Soft sync capabilities are slightly different than hard sync. Soft sync, there is no soft sync in the Hydrasynth, and there is soft sync in the Argon8. So score 0 for the Hydrasynth and score 1 for the Argon8. We're going to look at a pure noise generator. that being for white noise, pink noise, and so forth. The Hydrasynth does have a 3-type noise generator. The Argon8 does not have a noise generator. Now, to be fair, the Argon8 does have waveforms that have noise built into them, but there is not a separate noise generator. So I'm going to score 1 for the Hydrasynth and 0 for the Argon8. And lastly, both synths have excellent modulation matrix capabilities. The Hydrasynth has 32 modulation matrix slots, and the Argon8 has 8 modulation matrix slots. So for the 4-to-1 advantage, I'm going to score 4 for the Hydrasynth and 1 for the Argon8.
Oh man, that's a lot of features. Let's take a look at the total for round 1. For the ASM Hydrasynth, they score 71.5.
The Modal Electronics Argon8, 44. All right, for round 2, we're going to talk about the sound qualities between the two synths. Now, as you saw in round 1, the Hydrasynth has a lot more capabilities in terms of modulations, in terms of LFOs and envelopes, and their mutants, their oscillator modulations, as opposed to the Argon8. With that great power comes the ability to make greatly bad sounds, though, if you're not careful. With the Argon8, it's a much more simple synthesizer, and that's actually a big benefit to it because you can't really get a bad sound out of the synth. Believe me, I've tried. You can't. Everything that comes out of the synth sounds really, really good. It just sounds right, sounds really right in the pocket. With the Hydrasynth, you have to resist the temptation to use all these great features and just use the right amount for the right sound, if that's what you really want. If you want something that's crazy sounding, you can really get that out of here. But it takes a lot more knowledge, and it takes a lot more patience to understand what's going on. With the Argon8, you can really get a quick sound, get something really, really good going, really fast, and get going with your music. So, for the round 2 roundup, I'm going to declare the winner Argon8.
Okay, I think it's no secret that I do favor the Hydrasynth over the Argon8. And the reason for that is because it just has so much more soundscaping capabilities with the additional LFOs and the additional envelopes. And also the user interface is a little bit easier to use, easier to get to. There's a lot less use of the shift key like on the Argon8 to get to what you want to do. That said, the Hydrasynth, it can get away from you if you're not careful, and it can sound very, very bright or harsh or whatever the people out there are calling it. If you know what you're doing, though, you can really rein it in and really make it sound great. The Argon8 is no slouch of a synthesizer, and in fact, I'd say you can't get a bad sound out of it. And that's one of the great things about it. So I would say if you're looking for your first synthesizer or you're looking for something just to add to your studio, I would probably recommend the Argon8 first. If you're really looking to get into deep soundscaping, really deep programming, the Hydrasynth is probably your best choice. Who's the winner?
The epic great battle of the digital wave scanning synthesizers.
Winner! Hydrasynth!
I want to say thank you for watching this video. Please do subscribe to this channel. Check out tjontheroad.com for more things to come. And thank you so much for your support.